The champagne glass felt cold against my palm as I stood in the gallery's back room, watching through the one-way glass as my mother sold my painting to a collector for $25,000. The same painting she'd told me 3 months ago was embarrassing and not real art. The same painting she demanded I stop wasting time on because no one makes money from doodling. The same painting she was now describing to Mrs. Eleanor Hartwick, one of Manhattan's most influential art collectors, as my daughter's early work while pocketing the check that should have had my name on it. I didn't gasp. I didn't cry. I didn't even let my hand shake as I raised the glass to my lips and took a slow sip of champagne I hadn't poured for myself. Instead, I smiled, a small, controlled smile that I'd been practicing in mirrors for exactly 73 days, ever since I'd discovered what my parents were planning to do. My father stood beside my mother, nodding along as she spun stories about nurturing my artistic talent from childhood and always believing in my vision. Lies. Every word. But Mrs. Hartwick was eating it up, her eyes bright with the thrill of discovering the next big thing in contemporary art. She had no idea she was buying stolen work from thieves who happened to share my DNA. Fascinating, Mrs. Hartwick said, examining the signature in the corner of the painting. My signature, though my mother had somehow convinced her it was a family name we all share. And you say Sienna has more pieces available? Sienna. My name. 26 years old, and apparently still not trusted to manage my own career, my own money, my own life. Oh, yes, my mother gushed. We're managing her portfolio carefully. She's terribly shy, you understand. Doesn't like the business side of art, so we handle all of that for her. She just wants to paint. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burst through that door and expose them in front of everyone. But I'd learned something important over the past 73 days. Revenge delivered hot burns the person serving it. Revenge served cold freezes the person receiving it. So I stood there, perfectly still, watching my parents sell 3 more of my paintings. Paintings they'd taken from my apartment while I was visiting my brother in Chicago. Paintings they'd told me they were storing safely until I got serious about real work. Paintings that were now earning them over $100,000 while I supposedly knew nothing about this private sale. But I knew everything. I'd known since the day I'd hired a private investigator to follow my mother after I noticed her asking too many questions about my work. I'd known since I discovered she'd been photographing my paintings and sending them to galleries under her own name. I'd known since I found the forged documents in her office that listed her as my legal representative and business manager. Documents I'd never signed, documents that gave her power of attorney over my artistic output. I'd known, and I'd been planning. The betrayal wasn't new. My parents had spent my entire life telling me art was useless, that I needed to study business, become a lawyer, do something practical. They'd refused to pay for art school, forcing me to work 3 jobs while attending community college just to learn the basics. They'd mocked my paintings, called them hobbies, demanded I grow up and get a real career. And then, 6 months ago, something changed. Suddenly, they were interested in my work, asking to see my pieces, offering to help me break into the art world. I'd been so desperate for their approval, so hungry for them to finally see my talent, that I'd let them in. I'd shown them everything. Trusted them with access to my studio apartment. Believed then when they said they wanted to support me. I'd been an idiot, but only for about 2 weeks. Because 2 weeks after I'd given them my spare key, I'd noticed a painting missing. Just one, a small piece I'd done of the Brooklyn Bridge at sunset. When I asked about it, my mother said she didn't know what I was talking about. Said I must have misplaced it. Suggested I was under too much stress and imagining things. That's when I'd started documenting everything, photographing my work, dating my pieces, installing hidden cameras in my apartment. And that's when I'd discovered the truth. My parents weren't supporting my art. They were stealing it. Sienna should be here, Mrs. Hartwick said, glancing around the gallery. I'd love to meet the artist behind such compelling work. She's terribly shy, my mother repeated, her hand fluttering to her chest in a gesture I recognized, the one she used when she was lying and needed to seem sincere. But I'll arrange a meeting, perhaps dinner next week. That would be lovely. I watched my mother accept another check, this one for $35,000 for a painting I'd spent 6 weeks creating. A painting that had kept me up until 3 a.m. most nights. A painting that represented hours of emotional excavation and technical precision. $35,000 that would go into my parents' bank account, not mine. But not for long. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Victoria, my lawyer. Everything's in place. Judge signed the order this morning. We move tomorrow at 9 a.m. I typed back with one hand, keeping my eyes on my parents through the glass. Perfect. Make sure the press is there. 3 dots appeared. Then, you're sure about this? Once we go public, there's no taking it back. I'm sure. They made their choice. Now they get to live with the consequences. Through the glass, I watched my mother laugh at something Mrs. Hartwick said. That laugh, bright and artificial, the one she used at charity galas and country club events. The laugh that said everything was perfect, that she was perfect, that our family was perfect. The laugh that had covered up 26 years of emotional manipulation and control. Tomorrow, that laugh would die. Tomorrow, the art world would discover that celebrated new artist representative Caroline Ashford had been selling her daughter's work without permission. Tomorrow, the galleries would learn that every sale had been fraudulent. Tomorrow, my parents would discover that I documented everything. Every theft, every forged signature, every fraudulent transaction. Tomorrow, they'd learn that you don't mess with an artist who knows how to paint a perfect picture of revenge. But tonight, I stood in the shadows and watched them perform, watched them pretend to be the parents they'd never been, watched them profit from work they'd spent years telling me was worthless. Your art is useless, my mother had told me 3 months ago, standing in my tiny studio apartment, looking at my paintings with the same expression she'd used to examine garbage. You're 26 years old, Sienna. It's time to grow up. Stop this childish fantasy and get a real job. I'd cried that night, questioned everything about myself, and I'd realized the truth. My art wasn't useless. It was valuable. Valuable enough for her to steal it. That realization had changed everything. It had transformed my hurt into fuel, my self-doubt into strategy, my pain into power. I watched my father shake Mrs. Hartwick's hand, his smile broad and satisfied. He'd always been the enforcer in our family, the one who'd shut down my dreams with cold logic and harsh reality. Art doesn't pay bills. He'd said when I was 16 and begging to take advanced painting classes. Math pays bills. Science pays bills. Law pays bills. Art is for people with trust funds and no ambition. Now he was collecting checks for my art, looking very satisfied with the bills it was paying. His bills, their bills, never mine. The private sale was ending. The collectors were leaving through the main gallery while my parents lingered in the back room, counting checks and calculating their profits. I'd seen enough. I slipped out the service entrance before they could spot me, stepping into the cool Manhattan night. The city stretched out before me, millions of lights, millions of stories, millions of people trying to make it in a world that didn't make it easy. But I wasn't just trying anymore. I was about to succeed in a way my parents had never imagined possible, because here's what they didn't know. While they'd been selling my work for hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'd been creating my masterpiece. Not a painting this time, a legal case so airtight it would destroy their reputation, recover every penny they'd stolen, and establish me as an artist in my own right. Tomorrow morning, at exactly 9 a.m., my lawyer would file a lawsuit against Caroline and Thomas Ashford for fraud, theft, and forgery. At 9:15 a.m., she'd release a press statement to every major art publication in the country. At 9:30 a.m., she'd serve them with a restraining order preventing them from selling, displaying, or claiming any connection to my work. And at 10 a.m., I'd be holding a press conference at my new gallery. Yes, my own gallery. The one I'd been secretly preparing for 3 months, where I'd unveil 20 new paintings and tell my story to the world. Not the story my parents had invented about the supportive family nurturing young talent. The real story. About an artist who'd been told her work was worthless, who'd fought to create anyway, whose own parents had stolen her success and sold it as their own. That story would sell. Not because it was sensational, though it was, but because it was true, and because every struggling artist who'd ever been told to get a real job would see themselves in it. My phone rang. My brother, Anton. "Hey," I answered, still walking toward the subway. "Did you watch?" he asked. His voice was tight with anger. Anton was 2 years older than me, had followed every rule our parents set, become the lawyer they'd wanted him to be. But he'd seen what they were doing to me. He'd been the one to recommend Victoria, his colleague, when I'd told him what I'd discovered. I watched. God, Sienna. I knew they were bad, but seeing it happen. "Tomorrow it ends," I said quietly. "Tomorrow everyone sees who they really are. Are you ready for the fallout? They're not going to take this quietly. Let them fight. I have evidence they can't dispute. I have witnesses they can't discredit. I have a paper trail they can't erase. They can scream all they want. It won't change the facts." He was quiet for a moment. "You've changed. You seem harder." "Not harder, just done being soft. There's a difference. I'm proud of you. You know that, right? For standing up to them, for refusing to let them define you." "Thanks, Anton. That means more than you know." I paused at the top of the subway stairs. "How's Chicago?" "Good, better since I got away from them. You should think about it too, after all this settles. Fresh start, new city. Maybe. But first, I'm taking back what's mine." After we hung up, I descended into the subway, joining the river of late-night travelers heading home. No one looked at me twice. No one knew that the tired-looking woman in jeans and a paint-stained jacket had just watched her parents steal over $100,000 of her work. No one knew that tomorrow, that same woman would become the center of one of the biggest art world scandals in years. I liked it that way. The invisibility, the underestimation. It was my greatest weapon. My parents had spent 26 years not seeing me, not seeing my talent, my determination, my intelligence. They'd looked at me and seen a dreamer, a failure, a disappointment, someone to control and manage and fix. They'd never seen the truth. I was an artist, and artists know how to tell stories, how to create narratives, how to paint pictures that make people see what you want them to see. Tomorrow, I'd show them my masterpiece, and it wouldn't be hanging on a wall. It would be displayed across every newspaper and website in the country. The story of Caroline and Thomas Ashford, respected art dealers, exposed as thieves who stole from their own daughter. The best part? Every sale they'd made would be reversed. Every collector would demand their money back. Every gallery would cut ties with them. Their reputation, the thing they valued more than their daughter's dreams, would be destroyed. And me? I'd finally be free. Free from their judgment. Free from their control. Free from the crushing weight of trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. I emerged from the subway near my apartment, walking the familiar streets of Brooklyn. The neighborhood was quiet, just a few people walking dogs, a couple arguing on a corner, someone practicing saxophone in an upper window. Normal life, continuing as always, unaware that tomorrow everything would change. My apartment was small, barely 400 square feet of studio space where I lived and worked and dreamed. My parents had always mocked it. "This is why you need a real career," my mother had said the first time she'd visited. "So you don't have to live like a college student forever." But I loved it. Every inch was mine. Every corner held something I'd chosen, created, or earned. It wasn't much, but it was real. Unlike the pristine suburban house I'd grown up in, where everything looked perfect and nothing felt true. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, flipping on the lights. My paintings covered the walls, the ones my parents hadn't managed to steal yet. Bright splashes of color, dark explorations of shadow, portraits of strangers I'd met on the subway. Each one told a story. Each one was a piece of my soul made visible. "Your art is useless," my mother's voice echoed in my memory. "No one wants to see your sad paintings of nothing." But someone had wanted to see them. Multiple someones. Mrs. Hartwick had paid $35,000 for one piece. $35,000 for a painting my mother had called worthless. That irony was almost too perfect. I made tea and sat by my window, looking out at the Brooklyn night. Tomorrow, everything changed. Tomorrow, I stopped being the daughter who tried to earn love through compliance. Tomorrow, I became the artist who demanded respect through truth. I thought about calling my parents, warning them, giving them one last chance to make it right. But they'd had 26 years of chances. They'd had months to tell me the truth about what they were doing. They'd had countless opportunities to support my art instead of stealing it. They'd made their choices. Now they'd live with mine. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from an unknown number. "Sienna Ashford, this is Marcus Huang from Art Weekly magazine. I received an interesting tip about tomorrow's press conference. Would love to discuss. Call me." I smiled. Victoria had worked fast. The press was already If you loved us, you'd stop embarrassing yourself with this art obsession, my father had said last year, after I'd won a small juried competition. Not congratulations, not pride. Just disappointment that I was still pursuing something they decided was worthless. But I didn't need their love anymore. I'd spent years chasing it, trying to earn it, hoping that if I just achieved enough, created enough, proved enough, they'd finally see me the way I needed to be seen. Now I understood. They'd never see me that way, because seeing me would require them to question themselves. And people like my parents never questioned themselves. They just found new ways to be right. So I'd stopped waiting for their approval, stopped hoping they'd change, stopped accepting the crumbs of conditional love they offered when I behaved the way they wanted. I'd started painting for myself, creating for myself, building a future that had nothing to do with their expectations. And tomorrow, that future began. I finished my tea and started preparing for bed, but sleep felt impossible. Adrenaline sang through my veins. Tomorrow, tomorrow, tomorrow. The word pulsed like a heartbeat. Before I turned off the lights, I stood in front of my favorite painting, a self-portrait I'd done 6 months ago, before I'd known my parents were stealing my work. In it, I looked fierce and certain, staring directly at the viewer with eyes that dared them to look away. My mother had seen that painting and laughed. "God, Sienna, why would anyone want to look at that? You look angry." "Maybe I am angry," I'd replied. "Angry doesn't sell. Happy sells. Pretty sells. Angry just makes people uncomfortable." But she'd been wrong. Mrs. Hartwick had bought that exact painting tonight for $35,000. Apparently, angry did sell, when it was honest, when it was real, when it came from someone who'd stopped apologizing for taking up space. Tomorrow, I'd make a lot of people uncomfortable, my parents most of all, and I couldn't wait. 2. I didn't sleep much. By 5 a.m., I gave up trying and made coffee, strong and black, exactly the way my parents said was too harsh and unladylike. I'd spent too many years drinking weak, milky coffee to please people who didn't actually care about my preferences. Now I drank what I wanted, when I wanted, how I wanted. Small rebellions, but they added up. At 7 a.m., I showered and dressed carefully. Black jeans, white button-down shirt, leather jacket. Professional, but creative. Confident, but not cocky. The outfit of someone who'd thought this through, someone who meant business. I pulled my dark hair into a neat bun, applied minimal makeup, let my work speak louder than my appearance. My phone was already buzzing with messages. "Victoria, meeting you at courthouse at 8:45. Bring copies of everything. Anton, good luck today. Call me after." And several more from unknown numbers, journalists who'd somehow gotten my contact information overnight. I ignored the journalists for now. They'd get their story at the press conference. At 8 a.m., I packed my bag with documents, copies of every painting's photograph, dated and time-stamped. Bank statements showing my parents' deposits. The forged power of attorney documents. Screenshots of my mother's emails to galleries. The hidden camera footage of them entering my apartment and taking paintings. My own contracts and receipts proving I'd created and owned everything they'd sold. Evidence. Mountains of it. Each piece carefully gathered, meticulously organized, professionally presented. I wasn't just accusing my parents of theft. I was proving it beyond any doubt. At 8:30, I left my apartment and headed to the courthouse. The morning was clear and cold, that particular October sharpness that makes every breath feel significant. New York hummed around me, people rushing to work, vendors setting up carts, the eternal symphony of car horns and conversation that made this city alive. I felt alive too, more alive than I'd felt in years, not because revenge was sweet, though there was satisfaction in it, but because I was finally standing up, finally refusing to be small, finally claiming space in the world without apologizing for it. The courthouse was exactly as imposing as I'd expected, all stone and stairs and the weight of law. Victoria met me at the entrance, looking sharp in her suit, briefcase in hand. "You ready?" she asked. "I've been ready for 73 days. She smiled at that. "You've counted?" "I've counted everything. That's why we're going to win." We walked through security, rode the elevator to the 3rd floor, and entered the judge's chambers at exactly 8:55 a.m. 5 minutes early. Professional. Prepared. Everything my parents had taught me to be, now used against them. Judge Catherine Morrison, no relation to anyone I knew, just the judge assigned to our case, sat behind an imposing desk, reading through the documents Victoria had filed yesterday. She was in her 50s, silver hair pulled back, reading glasses perched on her nose, the kind of focused intensity that suggested she didn't miss details. "Miss Ashford," she said, looking up at me. "I've reviewed your complaint. These are serious allegations against your parents. They're also true, Your Honor. I have extensive documentation. I've seen some of it. What I want to understand is your ultimate goal here. Is this about money, or is it about something else?" I'd prepared for this question. "It's about truth, Your Honor. My parents had spent my entire life telling me my art was worthless. Now they're profiting from that same art while telling the world they've always supported me. I want the truth on record. I want ownership of my work legally established. And yes, I want compensation for what they've stolen. But mostly, I want them to stop." Judge Morrison nodded slowly. "The restraining order you're requesting, preventing them from selling or displaying your work, that's already been granted. As of this morning, your parents are legally prohibited from any commercial use of your art. If they violate that order, they'll be held in contempt." Relief flooded through me, so intense, I had to steady myself against the table. "Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me yet. This is just the beginning. Your parents will contest this. They'll hire lawyers. This could get ugly. It's already ugly, Your Honor. I'm just making sure everyone can see it." She almost smiled at that. Almost. "The civil case for fraud and theft will proceed through normal channels. Based on the evidence I've seen, I'm inclined to rule in your favor, but due process must be followed. Expect this to take months." "I understand. However," she leaned forward, "the restraining order is immediate and permanent, unless they can provide evidence that you gave them permission to sell your work." "Can they provide that evidence?" "No, Your Honor, because I never gave permission." "Then that aspect is settled." She signed several documents, handed them to Victoria. "These are your copies. Serve them today. And Ms. Ashford, I hope your press conference goes well." It's rare to see someone stand up to family like this. Most people can't find the courage. Most people haven't watched their parents steal $100,000 of their work, Your Honor. This time she did smile. Fair point. We left the courthouse at 9:20 a.m., later than planned, but with everything we needed. The restraining order was official, signed, sealed, legally binding. My parents couldn't sell another painting, couldn't claim to represent me, couldn't profit from my work ever again. Now we serve them, Victoria said, pulling out her phone. I've got a process server waiting near their house. Once you give the word, he'll deliver the papers. I thought about my parents' morning routine. My father would be reading the paper at the breakfast table. My mother would be planning her day, gallery visits, lunch with friends, whatever activities filled the life of someone who didn't actually work, but pretended to be terribly busy. They'd be calm, comfortable, completely unaware that their world was about to detonate. Do it, I said. Victoria made the call. Go ahead, serve them now. It was 9:25 a.m. In approximately 3 minutes, a stranger would knock on my parents' door and hand them legal documents that would destroy their carefully constructed narrative. I tried to feel guilty about that, tried to summon some daughterly regret for what I was doing. But all I felt was clarity. Crystal clear, diamond-hard clarity that this was right. This was necessary. This was justice. Press conference at 10, Victoria reminded me. Your gallery is ready. The gallery is ready. The statement is ready. I'm ready. Then let's go show them what you've built. The gallery was in Chelsea, a small but prestigious space I'd rented 3 months ago using money I'd saved. The space was perfect. White walls, excellent lighting, my 20 new paintings already hung and arranged exactly as I'd envisioned. Each piece told part of the story. The pressure to conform, the pain of dismissal, the rage of betrayal, the strength of survival. The final painting, the centerpiece, was titled Useless. It showed a young woman painting while shadows of figures loomed behind her, their mouths open in silent criticism. But the woman's canvas was filled with light, brilliant, undeniable light that pushed back the darkness. My mother had inspired that painting. Every cruel word, every dismissive laugh, every time she'd made me feel small for daring to create. All of it poured into that piece, transformed into something beautiful and terrible and true. Journalists started arriving at 9:50 a.m. I watched them enter, recognizing faces from art publications, culture sections of major newspapers, even a few bloggers who'd built significant followings. Victoria had done good work spreading the word. At exactly 10 a.m., I stepped forward to address them. Thank you for coming, I began. My voice was steady, clear, carrying across the small space. My name is Sienna Ashford. I'm an artist. And for the past 6 months, my parents have been stealing my work and selling it as if they had permission. This morning, I filed a lawsuit against them for fraud and theft. I also obtained a restraining order, preventing them from ever selling my art again. The room erupted with questions, cameras flashing, recorders thrust forward. I held up my hand. I'll answer your questions, but first, I want to tell you the full story. Not the story my parents have been selling to collectors. A real story. For the next 30 minutes, I laid it all out. The childhood spent being told art was useless. The years of fighting for my work to be seen, valued, recognized. The moment I discovered they were stealing my paintings. The 73 days I'd spent documenting everything, building my case, preparing this moment. They told me art couldn't pay bills, I said. Then they used my art to pay their bills. They told me no one would ever want my work. Then they sold it for hundreds of thousands of dollars. The only thing they were right about was this. My art isn't useless. It's valuable. Valuable enough for them to risk everything to steal it. Marcus Huang from Art Weekly raised his hand. Have your parents responded to these allegations? They were served with the lawsuit about 30 minutes ago. I imagine they're responding right now. Are you afraid of how they'll retaliate? They can't retaliate, not legally. The restraining order prevents them from using my work. The lawsuit has evidence they can't refute, and the truth is now public. What can they do except admit they were wrong? And we all know people like my parents never admit they were wrong. That line landed. I could see it in the journalists' faces, the recognition that this was quotable, shareable, the kind of statement that would spread across social media by afternoon. If you don't mind me asking, said a woman from The Guardian, why now? Why expose them so publicly? Why not handle this privately? Because they made this public first, I said. They've been selling my work in public galleries, to public collectors, using my name and reputation. They turned my art into a commodity they didn't earn or create. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth about where it came from and who actually made it. Another question. What do you hope to achieve with this lawsuit? 3 things. First, ownership of all my work, legally established so they can never claim it again. Second, compensation for every painting they sold without my permission. Third, and most importantly, freedom. Freedom from their control, their manipulation, their constant message that I'm not good enough. This lawsuit is about more than money. It's about claiming my voice as an artist and my right to control my own work. The questions continued for another 20 minutes. I answered each one, honestly, directly, with the clarity that came from having thought about this moment for 73 days. No anger in my voice, just facts, presented calmly, undeniably. Finally, I opened the floor for people to view the new work. The 20 paintings I'd created specifically for this show, each one representing a different aspect of my journey. The journalists moved through the space, studying each piece, taking photos, making notes. I watched them look at Useless and saw the recognition in their faces. They understood. They got it. The painting spoke louder than any words I could say. My phone vibrated. A call from my mother's number. I declined it. It rang again immediately. Declined again. Then texts started flooding in. How dare you, you ungrateful child. After everything we've done for you, you're destroying this family. Call me right now. I blocked the number. Then blocked my father's number when he started calling too. They could communicate through lawyers like everyone else. Victoria appeared at my elbow. It's blowing up online. Your story is already trending. #uselessart is becoming a movement. Artists sharing their own stories of being told their work doesn't matter. I pulled out my phone and checked. She was right. The hashtag was everywhere. Thousands of artists posting about parents, teachers, partners who dismissed their work. My story had touched something raw and real. And buried in all those supportive messages, I found the ones from my parents' friends, their social circle, the people who'd known them for years. Is this true? Caroline, what's going on? I just saw the news about Sienna. Call me, we need to talk. Their reputation, the thing they'd valued above everything, above honesty, above their own daughter, was crumbling in real time. Perfect. The press conference ended around noon, but journalists lingered, examining the paintings, asking follow-up questions, requesting private interviews. I agreed to several, knowing that every article, every story, every piece of coverage would make it harder for my parents to spin their version of events. Around 1 p.m., Victoria pulled me aside. Your parents have hired Bernard Castellano. I felt my stomach drop. Castellano was one of the most aggressive defense attorneys in New York. Expensive, ruthless, known for destroying plaintiffs in civil cases through relentless procedural warfare. Of course they did, I said. They always hire the best when they want to win. He's already filed a motion to dismiss your case, claiming you gave verbal permission for them to handle sales. He's arguing that the lawsuit is retaliatory because you had a disagreement about career choices. I have documentation proving otherwise. I know. But this means they're going to fight ugly. Expect them to dig into your life, your finances, your relationships. They'll try to paint you as unstable, vindictive, a struggling artist who's jealous of their business success. Let them try. I've documented everything. And the restraining order is already granted. They can't sell my work regardless of what Castellano argues. True, but the civil case for compensation could get messy. Are you prepared for that? I'm prepared for whatever it takes. She studied my face. You've really fought this through, haven't you? Every angle, every response, every possibility. For 73 days. While they were selling my paintings and spending the money, I was building an ironclad case. While they were lying to collectors, I was gathering evidence. While they were celebrating their profits, I was planning their downfall. So yes, Victoria, I've thought this through. By 2 p.m., the story had exploded across the art world and beyond. Major news outlets were picking it up. Artist sues parents for selling her work without permission. family theft. When parents betray creative children. The dark side of art dealing. Sienna Ashford's story. My phone was unusable from the volume of messages, so I turned off notifications and focused on the gallery. Collectors were already calling, wanting to buy pieces from my new collection. Gallery owners were reaching out about representation. Museums were inquiring about potential exhibitions. The work my parents had said was useless was suddenly in high demand. Not because they'd sold it, because I'd created it, and now people knew my story. Around 3 p.m., Anton called. I just saw Mom and Dad. They're furious, threatening to disown you, cut you off completely. They already cut me off. They just didn't announce it formally. Dad says you've ruined their reputation, destroyed their business relationships, made them look like criminals. They are criminals. They stole my work and sold it. That's fraud. I know. I'm not defending them. I'm just warning you. They're not going to let this go quietly. They're talking about filing a countersuit, claiming you defamed them. Let them. Truth is a complete defense against defamation. Everything I've said is documented and provable. He was quiet for a moment. Are you okay? Really okay? This has to be taking a toll. I thought about that. Was I okay? I felt lighter than I'd felt in years, clearer, more certain of who I was and what I was worth. But there was also a hollow ache where my family used to be. Not grief exactly, more like the phantom pain of an amputated limb. I'm better than okay, I said finally. I'm free. That's good. That's really good. He paused. They're saying terrible things about you, making up stories, twisting the truth. Just be prepared for that. I expected it. People who won't admit they're wrong always attack the person who exposes them. After we hung up, I checked social media again. Anton was right. My parents' friends were starting to post their side of the story. How I'd always been difficult. How I'd refused good advice. How I was clearly unstable and vindictive. How they'd only been trying to help me and I'd turned on them viciously. But for every post defending my parents, there were 100 supporting me. Artists sharing their own stories. People praising my courage. Collectors canceling their relationships with my parents. Galleries releasing statements that they'd been deceived about the origin of the work they'd sold. The court of public opinion was ruling in my favor. That evening back at my apartment, I finally allowed myself to feel the weight of what I'd done. I'd declared war on my parents, cut them out of my life, exposed their theft to the entire art world. There was no going back from this, no reconciliation, no family holidays or birthday dinners or pretending everything was fine. I'd sacrificed the family I'd grown up with, but in exchange, I'd gained something more valuable, myself. My phone rang. An unknown number, but something made me answer. Sienna Ashford? A woman's voice, professional and warm. Yes, this is Diana Rothstein from the Rothstein Gallery. I'm calling because I've been following your story today, and I'd like to offer you something. The Rothstein Gallery. One of the most prestigious contemporary art spaces in Manhattan. Artists waited years for a chance to show there. What kind of something? I asked carefully. A solo exhibition. 3 months from now, our February slot just opened up. We'd feature your complete collection. Everything your parents stole plus your new work. We'd tell your story the right way. And Sienna? We'd do it with a level of publicity and prestige that would establish you as a major voice in contemporary art. Not as your parents' discovery, as yourself. I sat down, my legs suddenly weak. Why would you do that? Because your work is extraordinary. I've seen the photos from today's press conference. That piece, useless, it's museum quality. But more than that, your story matters. Every artist who's ever been told they're not good enough needs to see someone stand up the way you did today. This exhibition wouldn't just be about your art. It would be about every creative person who's ever been dismissed by the people who should support them most. I'm interested. I managed to say, good. I'll have my team send over a contract tomorrow. And Sienna? What you did today was brave. Most people spend their whole lives trying to earn approval from parents who'll never give it. You stopped trying and started succeeding. That's powerful. After she hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of my apartment, looking at my paintings on the walls. The work I'd created in secret, in stolen hours, in the face of constant discouragement. Work that was about to hang in one of the most important galleries in New York. My mother's voice echoed in my memory. Your art is useless. No one wants to see your sad paintings of nothing. But people did want to see them. They wanted to see them enough to offer prestigious exhibitions, to pay thousands of dollars, to share my story across the world. I'd been right all along. My art wasn't useless. My mother had just been wrong. That realization settled over me like a blanket. Not warm exactly, more like protective. The truth had been there all along. I just needed to stop listening to people who couldn't see it. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Castellano just sent over their response to the lawsuit. They're claiming you gave verbal permission and then changed your mind to embarrass them. Complete fabrication, but that's his strategy. We'll demolish it in court. I texted back, good, let them lie. We have evidence. Another text, this one from Maya Thornton, a gallery owner I'd met at an art fair last year. Just saw your press conference. Holy shit, Sienna. Want to get coffee tomorrow? I have some opportunities you might be interested in. And another, from a collector who'd bought one of my stolen paintings from my parents. I just learned the truth about the work I purchased. I'm returning it to you immediately and demanding a refund from your parents. Your art deserves to be controlled by the person who created it. I'll be bidding on your new work as soon as it's available. The messages kept coming. Support, opportunities, validation. The art world was rallying around me, and my parents were being frozen out. I thought about calling them. Not to apologize. I had nothing to apologize for, but to explain. To try one more time to make them understand why what they'd done was wrong. But I already knew how that conversation would go. They'd deny everything, twist my words, make me the villain in their story. They'd never admit fault, never acknowledge the pain they'd caused, never see me as anything other than a disappointment who'd betrayed them. So I didn't call. I blocked another 10 numbers that were probably their friends trying to reach me on their behalf. I ordered takeout and opened my laptop to start drafting my statement for the Rothstein Gallery exhibition. 3 months to create enough work to fill their space. 3 months to establish myself as an artist, independent of my parents' name and influence. 3 months to prove that everything I'd been working toward for years had been real, valid, worthwhile. I could do it. I'd been doing it my whole life, just without recognition. Around 10 p.m., someone knocked on my door. I checked the peephole, Anton, carrying what looked like a bottle of wine and a bag of takeout. I opened the door. I already ate. Then I'll eat while you talk. He came in, set the food on my small kitchen counter. You killed them today. Absolutely destroyed them. Mom called me 6 times. Dad sent me 17 texts. They're spiraling. Good. Sienna. He opened the wine, poured 2 glasses even though I hadn't agreed to drink. I need to know, are you sure about all this? Really sure? Because once you go down this path, there's no coming back. The family is going to fracture permanently. The family fractured the day they decided to steal from me. I'm just making everyone see the truth. But what if... He stopped, choosing his words carefully. What if there's a way to fix this? What if they apologize, give back the money, acknowledge what they did wrong? They won't. People like Mom and Dad don't apologize. They double down. They attack. They rewrite history until they're the victims and I'm the villain. I've seen it my whole life, Anton. This is who they are. Maybe. But they're also our parents. No, I set down the wine glass he'd handed me without drinking. They're the people who raised us. That's biology, not love. Real parents support their children. Real parents celebrate their children's talents. Real parents don't steal from their children and then lie about it. So no, Anton. They're not my parents anymore. They're just 2 people who spent 26 years making me feel worthless so they could profit when I finally became valuable. He was quiet, staring into his wine. When you put it like that, I can't argue. I worry about you. About what this is costing you emotionally. It's costing me less than continuing to live under their control would have cost. Trust me. We sat in silence for a while. and I let myself lean against my brother's shoulder. Anton had his own complicated relationship with our parents. He'd followed their rules, become the lawyer they wanted, and still never quite earned their approval. He understood, in his own way, what it meant to be seen as a tool rather than a person. "The exhibition at Rothstein," he said finally. "That's huge. Congratulations." "Thanks. I'm terrified." "You should be. But you're also ready." "I've seen your work, Sienna. It's not just good, it's necessary. People need to see what you create. They need to hear your voice. And now they finally will, without Mom and Dad's filter distorting everything." After he left, I stood at my window, looking out at Brooklyn's nighttime sprawl. Somewhere across the river, in their perfect suburban house, my parents were probably still awake, probably strategizing with their expensive lawyer, probably convinced they could win this fight. Let them be convinced. I had truth on my side. I had evidence. I had the entire art world watching. And most importantly, I had 26 years of experience being underestimated by them. I knew their tactics, their patterns, their weaknesses. They thought I was just a dreamer, a disappointed daughter lashing out. They didn't realize I was a strategist who'd been planning this for 73 days. Didn't realize that every move I'd made had been calculated. Didn't realize that by the time they'd figured out I was serious, I'd already won. Tomorrow, the real work began. But tonight, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I slept peacefully. Not because everything was resolved. It wasn't. But because I'd finally stopped waiting for permission to claim my own life. And that freedom was worth everything I'd lost. 4. Morning arrived with more media requests than I could possibly accept. The story had spread beyond art publications into mainstream news. Artist versus parents. The fight for creative control was trending across multiple platforms. My face was being shared alongside images of my paintings, and the narrative was clear. This wasn't just about one family's dysfunction. It was about every creative person who'd ever been told their dreams were worthless. I was getting ready for a follow-up meeting with Victoria when my phone rang with a FaceTime call from an unknown international number. Something made me answer. A woman appeared on screen, maybe 60, with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, sitting in what looked like a sun-drenched studio. "Sienna Ashford?" "I apologize for the intrusion. My name is Gabriela Santos. I'm an art curator in Sao Paulo, Brazil. I've been following your story, and I needed to speak with you directly. I'm sorry, I'm not taking unsolicited calls right now. Please, just 2 minutes. I promise this is important." Something in her voice made me pause. 2 minutes. Thank you. "Sienna, 35 years ago, I was you. My parents were art dealers in Portugal. They told me I had no talent, that I should give up painting and do something practical. So I did. I became a lawyer, spent 20 years being miserable, and only returned to art when they died, and I was finally free of their judgment." I sat down slowly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because watching you fight back, watching you refuse to let them destroy you, it's the most powerful thing I've seen in decades. You did what I couldn't do. You stood up while you still had time to build a career. And I want to help you. Help me how? I'm curating a major international exhibition on artistic resilience. Artists who've created despite systemic dismissal. It's going to travel to 12 cities over 2 years. Sao Paulo, Mexico City, Berlin, Tokyo, everywhere. I want your work to be featured, not as a victim story, but as a warrior story. Would you be interested?" My 2 minutes were up, but I didn't care. "Very interested. Good, I'll send details through your representative. But Sienna, don't let this lawsuit consume you. Yes, fight for what's yours, but keep creating. Keep making new work. That's how you truly win, not by destroying them, but by building something so undeniable, they become irrelevant to your success." After she disconnected, I sat staring at my phone. An international exhibition. My work traveling the world, telling my story to artists everywhere who'd faced similar battles. This was bigger than revenge now. This was becoming a movement. Victoria's office was in Midtown, a sleek space that screamed competence and expensive legal expertise. She had the Castellano response spread across her conference table when I arrived. "It's mostly what we expected," she said, pointing to various sections. "He's claiming verbal permission, making it a he said, she said situation. But here's where he messed up." She pulled out a document. "He's arguing that you discussed sales strategy with your mother in March, implying consent, but your hidden camera footage is time-stamped. You didn't give them your spare key until April, so how could you have discussed sales strategy in March for Wake they didn't have access to yet?" "They're lying," I said, "and we can prove it." "Exactly. He's building his case on a foundation that contradicts their own timeline. Plus, I've been talking to the collectors your parents sold to. Mrs. Hartwick is willing to testify that your mother explicitly told her she had legal authority to sell your work. That's fraud, Sienna. Textbook fraud. So we can win? We can demolish them. The restraining order already stands. The civil case is just about compensation and damages. And based on this response, Castellano doesn't have anything real to work with. He's hoping to intimidate you into settling. I'm not settling. I know. That's why we're going to make them pay every penny they stole, plus damages, plus your legal fees. By the time you're done, they'll wish they'd just admitted fault and returned the money quietly." We spent 3 hours going through strategy, preparing responses, building our counter-argument. Victoria was meticulous, catching every inconsistency in Castellano's filing, every weak point we could exploit. "One more thing," she said as I was leaving. "Be prepared for them to attack your character. Castellano's style is to make the plaintiff look unstable, emotional, vindictive. He'll dig into your past, your relationships, anything he can use to paint you as untrustworthy. Let him dig. My past is being told I'm not good enough while working 3 jobs to pay for art school. What's he going to find? That I was tired and broke? That I struggled? That makes their theft worse, not better. That's the right attitude. Just don't engage with them directly. No contact, no messages. Nothing that can be twisted. Everything goes through me." I left her office feeling energized rather than drained. This wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was a reckoning. Every document we filed, every piece of evidence we submitted, was another nail in the coffin of their credibility. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is your mother. We need to talk. What you're doing is destroying our family. How can you be so cruel?" I screenshot the message and sent it to Victoria with a note. "They're trying to contact me directly." Violating the no contact except through a lawyer's agreement? Her response was immediate. "Forward any future messages directly to me. Don't respond. I'll file a complaint about this contact." Another text from my mother. "Your father is in the hospital. The stress of what you've done has given him chest pains. If something happens to him, it's on your conscience." I felt a momentary spike of panic. Was he really in the hospital? Before I remembered their pattern. This was classic manipulation. Create an emergency, blame me for it. Force me to break my boundaries to prove I still can. I forwarded that message to Victoria too, then blocked the number. If my father was actually in the hospital, which I doubted, it wasn't because of my lawsuit. It was because of his own choices. He'd chosen to steal from me. He'd chosen to lie to collectors. He'd chosen to fight instead of admitting fault and making it right. Those were his choices, not mine, and I wouldn't let their manipulation tactics work anymore. By evening, I was back in my studio apartment, trying to focus on creating new work for the Rothstein exhibition. But my mind kept circling back to my mother's texts, to the accusation that I was destroying the family. Maybe I was, but they'd destroyed me first, piece by piece, year after year, until I'd almost believed I was worthless. They'd taken my dreams and called them childish. They'd taken my work and sold it as their own. They'd taken 26 years of my life and made me small so they could feel big. So yes, I was destroying the family. The fake family. The performed family. The family that only existed when I stayed quiet and compliant. I was destroying that family gladly. Because underneath, it might be a chance to build something real. Or maybe not. Maybe my parents were incapable of real relationship, incapable of seeing me as anything other than an extension of themselves. Maybe this lawsuit would end with permanent estrangement and no reconciliation. I could live with that. I'd been living with emotional estrangement for years already. Legal estrangement was just making it official. I pulled out a fresh canvas and started sketching. Not for the Rothstein show. This was just for me. A painting of a door, closed and locked, with light seeping through the cracks. On one side, shadows and grasping hands. On the other side, open space and possibility. The title came to me immediately, Necessary Endings, because that's what this was. Not a tragedy, not a failure, not a destruction. Just an ending that had to happen so something new could begin. My phone rang. Anton. Have you heard from them? He asked without preamble. Mom texted claiming Dad's in the hospital. It's manipulation. Actually, he is in the hospital. I just left. But it's not serious. They did some tests. Everything's fine. It was a panic attack, not a heart attack. I felt relief and anger in equal measure. So she lied about the severity to manipulate me, basically. And when I told Dad you weren't going to rush over, he got angry, said you'd chosen your art over your family, and that you were dead to him now. Good. That makes things simpler. Sienna. No, Anton. Listen. I've spent 26 years trying to earn their love by being who they wanted me to be. It never worked. They never loved the real me. They loved the version of me they could control. So if standing up for myself means I'm dead to them, then fine. I'd rather be dead to them than dead inside because of them. He was quiet for a long moment. You're right. I know you're right. It's just hard to watch the family fall apart. The family fell apart a long time ago. We're just finally admitting it. After we hung up, I stared at my partially completed painting. Necessary endings. That's what this was. The end of pretending, the end of performing, the end of sacrificing myself to make them comfortable. And the beginning of everything else. The next 2 weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, media interviews, and creative work. The lawsuit progressed exactly as Victoria predicted. Castellano kept filing motions to dismiss. We kept demolishing them with evidence, and the judge kept ruling in our favor. Every hearing ended the same way. My parents looking shell-shocked, their lawyer looking frustrated, and me looking calm because I knew we'd already won. The art world had firmly taken my side. Galleries that had worked with my parents were severing ties. Collectors were demanding refunds. Art publications were writing think pieces about family exploitation in creative industries. I'd become the face of a conversation people needed to have. But the most significant development came on a Wednesday afternoon when Mrs. Eleanor Hartwick, the collector who'd paid $35,000 for my stolen painting, called me directly. Miss Ashford, I owe you an apology, she began. When I purchased your work through your parents, I did due diligence on the art, but not on the transaction. That was negligent of me. Mrs. Hartwick, you were deceived. This isn't your fault, perhaps. But I've been collecting for 30 years. I should have insisted on meeting the artist. I should have questioned why you weren't present. I let your mother's story blind me to obvious red flags. She paused. I've returned the painting to you, and I've demanded a full refund from your parents, but I'd like to do more. More? I'm hosting a collector's dinner next month. 50 of the most influential collectors in New York will be there. I'd like you to be the featured artist, not to sell work, though that would certainly happen, but to tell your story. To help us understand how we can do better, be more careful, protect artists instead of inadvertently enabling their exploiters. I'd be honored. Good, because Sienna, what happened to you is symptomatic of a larger problem in the art world. We fetishize the starving artist, we romanticize struggle, and we don't ask enough questions about who actually benefits from an artist's work. You're changing that conversation. This dinner will amplify that change. After we hung up, I sat with what she'd said. I'd started this as personal revenge, exposing my parents, recovering my work, establishing my independence. But it had evolved into something bigger. I was accidentally leading a movement about artistic autonomy and family exploitation. The responsibility of that was terrifying, but also clarifying. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every creative person who'd been dismissed, exploited, or stolen from by people who should have protected them. Victoria called that evening with an update. They're trying to settle. What? Castellano just sent over a proposal. They'll return all remaining paintings in their possession. They'll pay back 50% of the money they made from sales, and they'll sign an agreement never to sell your work again. In exchange, you drop the lawsuit and sign an NDA preventing you from discussing the case publicly. Absolutely not. That's what I told him. But Sienna, you should understand what this means. They're panicking. Offering to settle means they know they're going to lose. They're trying to minimize damage and shut you up. The answer is no. I want 100% of the money they stole, plus damage. The public deserves to know what they did. They're going to argue that your refusal to settle proves this is about destroying them, not about justice. Let them argue that. The judge has seen the evidence. She knows who the real criminals are. Okay, I'll send back our counteroffer. Full restitution, damages, fees, public admission of wrongdoing, and no NDA. Want to bet they reject it? No bet. They'll never admit fault publicly. Their reputation is all they have left. She was right. Castellano rejected our counteroffer within an hour, and we went back to preparing for trial. The date was set for 6 weeks out, plenty of time for me to finish my work for the Rothstein exhibition, which was now just 2 months away. I spent every spare moment in my studio, creating. The new work was different from anything I'd done before. Rawer, angrier, but also more hopeful. Each painting told part of the story. The pain of dismissal, the fury of betrayal, the strength of survival, the joy of freedom. One painting, Permission Denied, showed a young woman painting while holding up her hand in a stop gesture. Behind her, shadowy figures tried to reach for her canvas, but couldn't touch it. She'd created a boundary they couldn't cross. Another, Self-Made, depicted an artist literally painting herself into existence, brushstroke by brushstroke, with no one else in the frame. Just her canvas, and the work of becoming real. My favorite, though, was The Theft. It showed hands reaching into a studio, taking paintings, while in the background, barely visible, was a figure watching calmly, taking notes, documenting everything. That was the moment I'd shifted from victim to strategist. The moment I'd stopped reacting and started planning. The moment I'd realized that the best revenge wasn't emotional. It was methodical. A month after the press conference, I received an email that made my hands shake. Dear Miss Ashford, my name is Professor Harold Chang, and I teach art law at Columbia University. I've been following your case with great interest. Would you consider being a guest lecturer for my class? We're studying artist rights and family exploitation, and your case is the most high-profile example of these issues in years. I think hearing directly from you would be invaluable for my students. We can offer a modest honorarium, and of course, this would be excellent exposure for your upcoming exhibition. Please let me know if you'd be interested. I replied immediately, Professor Chang, I'd be honored to speak to your class. When would you like me to come? Teaching at Columbia, telling my story to future art lawyers who might protect other artists from what I'd experienced. This was legacy building, not just revenge. The lecture was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I prepared obsessively, creating a presentation that walked through every step of my case. How I'd discovered the theft, how I'd documented it, how I'd built my legal strategy, and what I'd learned about protecting artistic rights. The day of the lecture, I dressed in the same outfit I'd worn to the press conference. Black jeans, white shirt, leather jacket. My armor, my uniform, my visual statement that I was serious and professional and not to be underestimated. The lecture hall was packed. maybe 200 students, plus several other professors who'd apparently heard about the talk. Professor Chang introduced me with impressive credentials I'd earned in the past month. Artist, legal pioneer, and advocate for creative autonomy. I stood at the podium and looked out at all those young faces. Future lawyers, future advocates, future protectors of artists' rights. And I told them everything. My parents told me my art was useless, I began. Then they stole it and sold it for hundreds of thousands of dollars. That contradiction tells you everything you need to know about their values. They didn't think my work was worthless. They just wanted me to think it was worthless so I wouldn't fight back when they took it. For 90 minutes, I walked them through the case. I showed them the documentation I'd gathered. I explained the legal strategies Victoria had used. I discussed the restraining order, the civil suit, the media strategy that had turned public opinion in my favor. The most important lesson I can teach you, I said near the end, is that evidence is everything. Feelings don't hold up in court. Memories can be disputed. But documentation, photos, videos, dated files, bank records, that's undeniable. When you're fighting people who have more money and power than you do, evidence is your equalizer. Would you have handled this differently if you'd known it would end with complete estrangement? I thought about that question carefully. No, I said finally, because the relationship I had with them was built on me being small so they could feel big. That's not a relationship worth preserving. Yes, it hurts to lose your parents, but it hurts more to lose yourself trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. That answer resonated. I could see it in the students' faces, recognition, understanding, the relief of hearing someone say out loud what they'd been thinking privately. After the lecture, students lined up to talk to me. Artists who'd been dismissed by their families, lawyers who wanted to specialize in artist rights, people who just needed to hear that standing up to family was possible and worth it. One student, tears in her eyes, grabbed my hand. Thank you. My father keeps telling me I'm wasting my life studying art. After hearing you today, I'm going to stop apologizing for wanting what I want. Good, I said. Stop apologizing for taking up space. Stop shrinking to make other people comfortable. Your parents have to return all remaining artwork, pay back every dollar they made from sales, pay additional damages for emotional distress and reputational harm, and cover all your legal fees. Total amount, just over $400,000. I stopped walking. 400,000. The sales were more extensive than we initially knew. Turns out they've been selling your work for almost 8 months, not 6. She also hit them with punitive damages because the fraud was so clear-cut. Sienna, you won. Completely, totally, undeniably won. I leaned against a building, trying to process. $400,000. Not just compensation, vindication. Proof that my work had always been valuable, that I'd been right to fight, that everything I'd been working toward for years had merit. When do they have to pay? 90 days. And if they don't, we can put liens on their property, garnish bank accounts, whatever it takes. The judge was very clear. This debt is enforceable and non-negotiable. After we hung up, I just stood there on the street, letting it sink in. I'd won. Not just legally, morally, ethically, completely. The judge had looked at all the evidence and ruled that my parents were thieves who owed me everything they'd stolen, plus damages for the harm they'd caused. I wanted to feel triumphant, victorious, satisfied. Instead, I felt hollow, empty in a way I hadn't expected, because winning meant it was over. And being over meant accepting that my parents had really done this, that they'd really stolen from me, that they'd really valued money more than their daughter. There was no ambiguity left, no room to pretend it had been a misunderstanding. The judge had confirmed what I'd known for months. They'd deliberately, systematically exploited me. I called Anton. I heard, he said immediately. You won. Yeah, you don't sound happy about it. I am happy. I just thought winning would feel different. Better somehow. Revenge usually doesn't feel as good as we think it will. That's why it's called bittersweet. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. Was it? Or was it both? He wasn't being critical, just honest. You wanted them to pay for what they did, and now they're paying. That's justice, yes, but it's also revenge. You made sure they lost everything. Money, reputation, credibility. You destroyed them as thoroughly as they tried to destroy you. They deserved it. Maybe they did. But that doesn't mean it's going to feel good. Necessary and good aren't the same thing. He was right, and I hated it. I'd spent months planning this, executing every step perfectly, winning every battle. But now that I'd won the war, I felt tired. Just incredibly bone-deep tired. Are they going to appeal? I asked. Probably. Dad's talking about it. But Castellano told them they'd lose. The evidence is too strong. They're better off paying quietly and trying to rebuild their reputation. They can't rebuild their reputation. Everyone knows what they did. They'll try anyway. That's who they are. They'll spend years insisting they were misunderstood, that you're vindictive and unstable, that they're the real victims. They'll never admit fault. I know. That's why I made sure the truth is documented and public. So, 50 years from now, when people look back at this, they'll know exactly what happened. They won't be able to rewrite history. We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up, and I continued walking toward the subway. The city moved around me, people rushing to appointments, living their lives, unaware that I'd just achieved what I've been working toward for months. A victory I'd planned so carefully had arrived, and it felt simultaneously huge and small. That night, alone in my apartment, I finally let myself cry. Not sad tears exactly, more like release. The tension I'd been holding for months, the constant vigilance, the fear that my plan might fail, all of it came pouring out in great, gasping sobs that left me exhausted and somehow lighter. I'd won. I really truly won. And tomorrow, I'd figure out what winning meant for the rest of my life. The weeks following the judge's ruling were strange. I'd spent so long focused on the lawsuit, on winning, on proving my parents wrong, that I hadn't thought much about what came after. Now after had arrived, and I had to figure out how to build a life that wasn't defined by fighting them. The Rothstein Gallery exhibition was 6 weeks away. I had 17 paintings completed and needed 3 more to fill the space Diana Rothstein had offered me. But every time I sat down to create, I found myself staring at blank canvases, uncertain what to say now that the battle was over. "You're blocked," my friend Lucas said when he visited my studio. Lucas was a sculptor I'd met at an art fair years ago, before any of this happened. He'd been supportive throughout the lawsuit, offering perspective when I needed it. "I'm not blocked. I'm just transitioning." To what? To being an artist without an enemy. All my recent work has been about the fight with my pants. Now that fight is over, what do I paint about? Anything you want. That's the gift of freedom. You don't have to react to them anymore. You can create proactively instead of defensively. He was right, but the shift was harder than I'd expected. For months, anger had been fuel. Now I needed to find a different energy source. I decided to take a week off from painting and just live. I went to museums, walked through the city, watched people, read books that had nothing to do with art or family or law. I let myself be aimless for the first time in years. On the 4th day of my break, I was at a coffee shop in Brooklyn when someone slid into the chair across from me. I looked up, ready to tell them the table wasn't actually available, and found myself facing my mother. She looked terrible, older than I remembered, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes that even expensive concealer couldn't hide. She was wearing the kind of casual clothes she'd always mocked me for wearing, her usual polish replaced by something that looked like actual exhaustion. "Don't leave," she said before I could speak. "Please, just give me 5 minutes." "Why would I do that? We're not supposed to have contact." The judge specifically. The judge said no contact about the case. This isn't about the case. This is about me trying to understand how we got here. I should have left. should have documented this interaction for Victoria, should have maintained the boundaries I'd established. But curiosity kept me in my seat. Curiosity, and, if I'm honest, a small hope that maybe she'd finally say the words I'd been waiting my whole life to hear. 5 minutes, I said. She took a shaky breath. I'm not here to defend what we did. The judge ruled against us. The evidence was clear. We took your work without permission and sold it as if we had the right. That was wrong. So you admit it? I admit the facts, yes. What I'm struggling to understand is why you couldn't have just talked to us. Why did you have to destroy us publicly instead of handling this privately? And there it was, the victim narrative Anton had warned me about. She wasn't here to apologize. She was here to make me feel guilty for defending myself. I tried talking to you, I said, keeping my voice level. Continue. For 26 years, I tried. I tried showing you my work. I tried explaining why it mattered to me. I tried asking for support. And what did you say? That my art was useless. That I was wasting my life. That I needed to grow up and get a real job. So no, Mom, I didn't destroy you publicly. I exposed you publicly. There's a difference. But the lawsuit, the press conference, all of it, you knew it would ruin our reputation. Your reputation deserved to be ruined. You were fraudulently selling my work. That's not a difference of opinion. That's a crime. I leaned forward, and you still haven't apologized. Not once in this conversation have you said, I'm sorry for stealing from you. Just why did you have to make it public? Do you even hear yourself? She looked down at her hands, twisted together on the table. Your father and I thought we were helping you. We thought that if we could establish you in the market, get collectors interested, you'd finally see that your work could be commercial. We were trying to support you. By lying to collectors about having my permission? By keeping all the money? By telling me my art was worthless while profiting from it? That's not support, Mom. That's exploitation. We were going to tell you. Once we'd built up enough interest, we were going to reveal that you were the artist and transition you into handling your own sales. I don't believe you. It's the truth. No, it's the story you've convinced yourself is true because admitting you stole from your own daughter is too painful. But I have recordings of you, Mom. Recordings of you telling Mrs. Hartwick that I was too shy to handle business. Recordings of you saying you'd always be my representative. You weren't planning to step back. You were planning to control my career forever. She flinched at that. You recorded me? I documented everything. That's how I won the case. That's how I proved you were lying. So please don't sit here and tell me you were trying to help me when I have evidence proving otherwise. You've become so cold, she said, tears starting to form. This lawsuit, this vendetta, it's changed you into someone I don't recognize. Good, because the person you recognized was the person I had to be to survive in your house. Compliant, small, constantly apologizing for wanting things you didn't approve of. I'm not that person anymore. I'm the person I should have been allowed to be all along. Sienna, my 5 minutes are up. I stood, gathering my things. And Mom, if you contact me again outside of legal proceedings, I'll file for a restraining order. Do you understand? You'd do that? To your own mother? You stole from your own daughter. So yes, I'd do that. Because blood doesn't give you the right to hurt me and face no consequences. I left her sitting there and walked out into the bright Brooklyn afternoon, my hands shaking, but my resolve steady. That conversation had confirmed what I'd already known. My parents would never truly understand what they'd done. They'd always see themselves as well-intentioned parents who'd been betrayed by an ungrateful daughter. And I was okay with that. Their inability to see truth wasn't my responsibility to fix. I went straight home and called Victoria to document the interaction. She was furious that my mother had approached me, but agreed it didn't technically violate the order since she hadn't discussed the case directly. Still, Victoria said, it shows they're trying to manipulate you emotionally. Document everything about this conversation, when, where, what was said. If they try again, we'll seek a broader restraining order. She wanted me to feel guilty for exposing them. Of course she did. That's classic abuser behavior. Make the victim feel responsible for the consequences of exposing the abuse. Don't fall for it. I won't. I just thought maybe, finally, she'd actually apologize, actually admit what she did wrong. People like your parents rarely do, Sienna. Admitting fault would require them to fundamentally reconsider who they are. That's too painful, so they'll keep rewriting history until they're the heroes of their own story. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment and stared at the 3 blank canvases waiting for me. What Lucas had said was right. I needed to create proactively now, not defensively. But what did that look like? The confrontation with my mother had stirred something up. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. She'd shown me once again that I was right to have done what I did. That there was no private resolution possible with people who refused to acknowledge reality. I picked up a brush and started painting without overthinking it. Just color and movement and feeling. What emerged over the next several hours was different from anything I'd created before. Abstract, swirling, full of motion and light. It felt like freedom looked. Like possibility. Like the moment you realize you're not trapped anymore. I titled it After, because that's where I was now. After the fight. After the betrayal. After the victory. In the space where I got to decide what came next, without anyone else's permission. That painting became the cornerstone of the Rothstein exhibition. Diana saw it during a studio visit and immediately understood what it represented. "This is your transformation piece," she said. "Everything else in the show is about what was done to you. This is about what you're becoming, despite it all. We should put it front and center, the first thing people see when they walk in." The exhibition opened on a freezing February evening, the kind of New York cold that makes your breath visible and your fingers numb, even with gloves. But inside the Rothstein Gallery, it was warm and crowded, packed with collectors, critics, artists, and journalists who'd been following my story. Anton came, looking proud in his suit. Lucas brought his girlfriend. Maya from the gallery scene arrived with her partner. Victoria showed up, straight from court, still in her lawyer armor. Even Professor Chang from Columbia attended, bringing several of his students. But the most meaningful guest was Gabriela Santos, who'd flown in from Sao Paulo specifically for this opening. She embraced me warmly before the event started. "You did it," she said. "You not only survived, you transformed. This work is extraordinary. Thank you. And thank you for including me in your international exhibition. Knowing my story will reach artists around the world means everything. Your story is already reaching them. Do you know how many young artists have contacted me saying your case gave them courage to stand up to exploitative families? You've started something important, Sienna. Don't underestimate the impact. The exhibition itself was everything I'd hoped for. The pieces were hung perfectly, lit beautifully, each one given space to breathe and speak. Collectors circled through, studying the work, discussing it in low voices. Critics took notes. Photographers captured every angle, and at the center of it all was After, my abstract, hopeful, forward-looking piece that announced I was more than my trauma, more than my fight, more than what had been done to me. Diana gave a short speech introducing the exhibition. Sienna Ashford's work is remarkable, not just for its technical skill, though that's undeniable. It's remarkable because it documents a journey we all hope we'd have the courage to make. From victim to victor, from silence to voice, from accepting abuse to demanding justice. This exhibition is about more than one artist's fight with her family. It's about every creative person who's ever been told their dreams don't matter. Then it was my turn to speak. I'd prepared remarks, but standing there in front of everyone, I realized the prepared speech wasn't what needed to be said. 6 months ago, I began. My parents told me my art was useless. Today, every piece in this exhibition is sold out. That's not me bragging. That's me pointing out a truth. My work didn't suddenly become valuable when they decided to steal it. It was always valuable. I was always talented. The only thing that changed was that I finally stopped letting other people define my worth. I paused, looking around the room. If you take anything from this exhibition, let it be this. Don't wait for permission to value yourself. Don't wait for approval from people who've shown you they're incapable of giving it. Don't sacrifice your dreams to make others comfortable. Because your artists were nodding, critics were scribbling notes, and I felt something I'd been chasing my whole life. Validation. Not from my parents, not from any external authority, but from myself. I'd done something hard and important, and I'd done it well. After the formal program, people circulated through the gallery, many approaching me to share their own stories. A painter whose husband had destroyed her canvases out of jealousy. A sculptor whose mother had sabotaged gallery opportunities. A photographer whose partner had stolen and sold his work. Story after story of creative people being exploited by the people closest to them. Thank you for showing us it's possible to fight back, one woman told me, tears streaming down her face. I thought I just had to accept it. I thought standing up to family was wrong. But you proved it's not wrong, it's necessary. Late in the evening, after most guests had left, I stood alone in the gallery, looking at my work. 20 paintings that told the story of the worst and best year of my life. 20 pieces that documented pain and strength in equal measure. 20 proofs that I'd survived and emerged stronger. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Congratulations on your exhibition. I hope you're proud of destroying your family for 30 pieces of silver. Your father. I screenshot it, sent it to Victoria, and blocked the number. Then I deleted the screenshot from my phone. I didn't need to keep collecting evidence anymore. The fight was over. They'd lost. And their continued bitterness was their problem, not mine. Diana approached with champagne. First solo exhibition at Rothstein Gallery, sold out opening night, critical acclaim already rolling in. How does it feel? Like I can finally breathe, I said honestly. Good, because this is just the beginning. I've had 4 major collectors ask about future work. The international exhibition Gabriella mentioned wants to extend your segment. And I've been approached by a publisher about a potential book, part memoir, part analysis of artistic exploitation in families. A book. My story, in my words, permanent and undeniable. I'm interested. I thought you might be. The publisher is Sterling House. They want to set up a meeting next week if you're available. Everything was happening so fast. 6 months ago, I'd been a struggling artist whose parents thought she was wasting her life. Now I was exhibiting at prestigious galleries, being approached by publishers, building a platform that reached beyond my personal story to address systemic issues. I thought about my mother sitting in that coffee shop, asking why I couldn't have handled things privately. This was why. Because private confrontation would have resulted in them denying everything, gaslighting me, making me doubt my own reality. Public exposure had forced accountability. And that accountability was creating ripples far beyond my own situation. Yes, I told Diana. Set up the meeting. I want to write this book. Later, in a taxi heading home, I looked out at the city lights streaming past. Somewhere in the sprawling metropolis, my parents were probably nursing their wounds, telling anyone who'd listen that I was vindictive and cruel. Probably planning appeals or workarounds or new ways to avoid accepting responsibility. Let them. I was done being defined by their disapproval. Done waiting for the apology that would never come. Done hoping they'd suddenly see me clearly after 26 years of willful blindness. I'd won everything I'd set out to win. My work back, compensation for what was stolen, legal acknowledgement that I was right and they were wrong, and the freedom to build my career on my own terms. But I'd also won something I hadn't been seeking, community. A network of artists and advocates who understood what I'd experienced because they'd lived variations of it themselves. People who saw my fight and felt less alone in their own struggles. A movement, however accidental, toward treating creative work with the respect it deserved. That was worth more than any amount of money, more than any legal victory, more than revenge could ever be, because the best revenge I was learning wasn't destroying the people who'd hurt you. It was building something so meaningful that they became irrelevant to your success. It was transforming pain into purpose, anger into art, betrayal into breakthrough. My parents had tried to make me small. Instead, they'd given me a story big enough to matter to thousands of people who needed to hear it. And for that, for the unintentional gift of forcing me to become strong enough to fight back, I almost owed them thanks. Almost, but not quite. The book deal came through 3 weeks after the exhibition. Sterling House offered a substantial advance for my memoir, to be titled Useless, an artist's fight for her work and her voice. The publisher wanted me to tell the complete story: childhood, struggle, betrayal, legal battle, and aftermath. They wanted it raw and honest, a template for others facing similar situations. This isn't just an art world story, my editor Catherine Wu explained during our first meeting. It's a family dysfunction story. It's a story about gaslighting and exploitation and finally standing up. That resonates far beyond creative industries. Writing a book was harder than I'd anticipated. Not the mechanics of writing. I'd kept detailed journals throughout the ordeal, but the emotional excavation required to revisit everything. Each chapter meant reliving pain I'd started to process and move past. But it also meant controlling the narrative completely. My story, in my words, without anyone else's filter or spin. That power made the difficult work worthwhile. 3 months after the exhibition, the legal case reached its final stage. My parents had exhausted their appeals, and the judge's order stood. They owed me $400,000 to be paid in full within 30 days or face liens on their property. Victoria called me the day the payment cleared. It's done. The full amount just hit your account. You've been paid back for everything they stole, plus damages, plus legal fees. Sienna, you won. Completely, finally, officially won. I logged into my bank account and stared at the number. $400,000. More money than I'd ever had, earned through my own work but paid back through legal victory. It felt surreal, validating, and somehow still hollow. What do I do with it? I asked Victoria. Whatever you want. It's your money, your work, your victory. After we hung up, I sat with that question. What did I do with money that represented both my parents' theft and their forced acknowledgement of wrongdoing? I could put it toward a better apartment, though I'd grown to love my small studio. I could invest it, save it for the future, use it for financial security. Those were all reasonable options. But I kept thinking about all the messages I'd received from struggling artists. People working 3 jobs to pay for supplies. People whose families had sabotaged their careers. People who had talent and drive but no resources or support. By the end of the day, I'd made my decision. I called Anton first. I want to set up a foundation, a grant program for artists from unsupportive families. People whose parents won't pay for art school, whose families actively discourage their work, who need financial help to pursue their dreams despite family opposition. That's a beautiful idea, he said, and poetic. Using the money your parents stole to help other artists they would have dismissed as useless. Exactly. Can you help me set it up? Make sure it's legally structured correctly? Absolutely. I'll draft the paperwork this week. Next, I called Victoria. I want to use some of the settlement money to cover legal fees for artists dealing with similar situations. Create a fund that provides legal support for creative people being exploited by family members. Sienna, that's incredibly generous and needed. I've been contacted by at least a dozen artists since your case asking if I could help them, but most can't afford legal representation. Now they can. Let's make sure no one else has to face what I faced without resources to fight back. Within 2 months, the Sienna Ashford Foundation for Independent Artists was established. We offered grants of up to $10,000 for artists from non-supportive families, covering education, supplies, living expenses while they built their careers. We also provided free legal consultation for artists facing exploitation. The response was overwhelming. Within the first week, we received over 300 applications. Stories of parents who destroyed artwork, stolen commissions, sabotaged opportunities, or simply refused any support while demanding compliance with their vision of a real career. Reading those applications broke my heart and filled me with purpose simultaneously. I wasn't alone. My story wasn't unique, and now I could help others the way I wished someone had helped me. The foundation's first grant went to a 19-year-old photographer whose father had smashed his camera and refused to let him attend art school. We paid for his education, his equipment, and a mentor to guide his career development. 6 months later, his work was being exhibited in a small gallery in Philadelphia, and his father still wasn't speaking to him. But he was creating. Every grant we gave, every legal case we supported, every artist we helped escape family control, that was me, using what had been done to me to prevent it being done to others. My mother found out about the foundation through a news article and called me from a new number I hadn't blocked yet. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "You used our money to start a foundation?" she asked, her voice tight with anger. "Money that should have gone back to us. Money we earned through our work representing you." "Stop," I interrupted. "That money was court-ordered restitution for work you stole. It's my money, earned through my art. And yes, I'm using it to help other artists whose families exploit them. If you have a problem with that, take it up with the judge who ruled against you. You're making us look like monsters. I'm not making you look like anything. I'm just telling the truth about what you did. If the truth makes you look like monsters, maybe that's something you should examine. We're your parents. We deserve some respect. You were my parents. Now you're just two people who stole from me and are angry they got caught. And no, you don't deserve respect just because you gave birth to me. Respect is earned. You've spent 26 years earning the opposite." She hung up without another word, and I blocked that number too. How many numbers would I have to block before they understood I was serious about no contact? The book was published in September, 9 months after my initial press conference. The publicity tour was intense. Interviews on morning shows, podcast appearances, bookstore readings in multiple cities. Every interviewer asked the same questions. Did I regret exposing my parents publicly? Had we reconciled? Did I think my actions were proportionate to their crime? My answers never changed. No. No. Yes. The book became a bestseller within 2 weeks. Reviews praised its honesty and its broader discussion of family exploitation. Readers flooded social media with their own stories, using the hashtag #uselessart to share experiences of being dismissed by people who should have supported them. But the most meaningful response came from a reader who showed up at a book signing in Boston. She was maybe 60, holding a worn copy of my book, tears streaming down her face. "I gave up painting 40 years ago," she told me. "My parents said it was useless, that I'd never make money, that I needed to be practical. So I became an accountant. I've been miserable ever since. But reading your book made me realize it's not too late. I'm 62 years old, and I'm going back to painting. Because you're right, our art is never useless." Proving that useless art could change lives, create communities, mattered deeply to thousands of people. Every person who read my book and decided to pursue their dreams was living proof that my parents had been wrong. A year after the lawsuit began, I was invited to give a TED Talk. The title, "The Productive Power of Anger: How Betrayal Became Purpose." Standing on that red circle, looking out at thousands of people in the audience and millions watching online, I told my story one more time, but with distance and perspective, with the foundation thriving and the book succeeding and my art career flourishing, I could tell it differently. "My parents told me my art was useless," I began, and for a long time I believed them. Because we tend to believe the people who raise us, especially when they say it confidently and consistently. But then they stole my supposedly useless art and sold it for hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that contradiction forced me to question everything they'd ever told me. I walked them through the journey: discovery, documentation, legal battle, victory. But I also talked about what came after. Revenge is empty if it's just about destruction, I said. But transformation, taking pain and converting it into purpose, taking anger and channeling it into action, taking betrayal and building something meaningful from the wreckage, that's powerful. That's lasting. That's worthwhile. I didn't destroy my parents by winning my lawsuit. They destroyed themselves by stealing from their own daughter. I just made sure everyone could see what they'd done. And then I used what I learned to help others facing similar situations. That's not revenge, that's revolution. The talk went viral, as modern TED Talks tend to. My face appeared on motivational posters. My quotes showed up on Instagram. I became, somewhat uncomfortably, a symbol for standing up to family dysfunction and pursuing dreams despite opposition. It was surreal, exhausting, and incredibly meaningful. 2 years after the initial confrontation, I received an unexpected letter. Not from my parents. They'd finally stopped trying to contact me after I'd blocked what must have been their 15th number. This letter came from Mrs. Eleanor Hartwick, the collector who'd bought my stolen painting and then returned it when she learned the truth. Dear Sienna, I wanted to update you on something I should have told you months ago. After I learned about your parents' theft, I did something I should have done before I ever purchased your work. I researched you thoroughly. What I found was extraordinary. Your early work, the pieces you created before your parents started stealing, shows remarkable talent and vision. But your recent work, everything you've created since standing up to them, shows evolution that most artists never achieve. Pain has refined your voice without destroying it. Anger has focused your vision without narrowing it. And courage has given your work a weight and significance that transcends technical skill. I'm writing to make you an offer. I'd like to commission a piece for my personal collection. Not because I'm trying to right my previous wrong. I can't undo buying stolen work, though I've tried through supporting your foundation. I'm making this offer because I genuinely want to own your art. Not as an investment, not as a story, but because your work moves me. Please consider it. And please know that what you've built from betrayal is remarkable. With admiration, Eleanor Hartwick. I sat with that letter for days before responding. Mrs. Hartwick wanting to commission work meant more than any review or award. It meant she valued my art for what it was, not for the story attached to it. She was seeing me as an artist, not as a victim or a victor, just as a creator whose work warranted attention. I accepted the commission. The piece I created for her was titled Full Circle, an abstract that incorporated elements from my earliest work and my most recent, showing evolution and continuity simultaneously. When I delivered it, she cried. "This is exactly what I hoped for," she said. "Thank you for trusting me with your work again. Thank you for seeing it clearly this time." That same month, Gabriela Santos's international exhibition opened its first venue in Sao Paulo. My section, titled Necessary Rebellion, featured 12 pieces that told the story of my fight with my parents. The exhibition would travel to 11 more cities over the next 18 months, and my work would travel with it. Standing in that gallery in Brazil, surrounded by artists from around the world who'd also created despite systemic dismissal, I felt something I'd been chasing my whole life: belonging. Not to a family, I'd accepted that my birth family was lost to me, but to a community of people who understood what it meant to fight for your right to create. Anton flew in for the opening. We stood together, looking at my paintings, and he said something that shifted everything. "You know what's funny? Mom and Dad spent 26 years trying to make you small, trying to convince you your art didn't matter. And all they did was create an artist whose work is literally traveling the world, inspiring thousands of people, changing lives. If they'd just supported you from the beginning, you might have been a moderately successful local artist. Instead, their betrayal gave you a story powerful enough to reach millions. They created the exact opposite of what they intended." He was right. My parents' worst act, stealing my work and lying about it, had become the catalyst for my greatest success, not because betrayal was good, but because I'd refused to let it destroy me. I'd transformed it into fuel, into purpose, into meaning. That was the real victory. Not the lawsuit, not the money, not the exhibitions or the book or the foundation, though those were all important. The real victory was that I'd taken the worst thing that had ever happened to me and built something beautiful from the wreckage. Do you ever regret it? Anton asked. The lawsuit? The public exposure? All of it? Do you ever wish you'd just walked away quietly? No, I said immediately. Because walking away quietly would have meant accepting their version of reality. It would have meant agreeing that my art was useless, that I was overreacting, that I should just get over it and move on. I couldn't do that. Not because I'm vindictive, but because accepting lies destroys you from the inside. Fighting for truth might be harder, but at least you can look at yourself in the mirror. They're never going to admit they were wrong, you know? They're going to die believing they were good parents who were betrayed by an ungrateful daughter. I know. And I've made peace with that. I don't need them to admit fault. I just needed them to stop hurting me. The lawsuit did that. The restraining order did that. The truth being public did that. They can believe whatever they want about me. It doesn't change reality. You've really changed, he said. The sister I grew up with would have kept trying to win their approval. This version of you doesn't need anyone's approval. That's not true. I need my own approval. That's harder to earn and more valuable to keep. We stayed in São Paulo for a week, attending panels about artistic freedom, meeting other artists whose work was featured in the exhibition, exploring a city I'd never visited before. It felt good to be far from New York, far from the constant reminders of the battle I'd fought. Here, I was just an artist among artists, telling stories through color and canvas. On our last night in the city, I got a message from Victoria. Your parents filed for bankruptcy. They're claiming your lawsuit destroyed their business and they can't recover. Thought you should know. I stared at that message for a long time. Bankruptcy. Complete financial collapse. Exactly what they'd always feared. Exactly what they'd stolen from me to prevent. And it had happened anyway, because they'd chosen theft over honesty. Did I feel guilty? Part of me wanted to. Part of me remembered being a little girl who loved her parents and wanted them to love her back. That part hurt for them, for the family we could have been if they'd made different choices. But the larger part, the grown woman who'd survived their exploitation and built something meaningful despite them, felt only certainty. They'd made their choices. I'd made mine. Their bankruptcy was a consequence of their fraud, not my lawsuit. I'd simply insisted on honesty and legal accountability. The destruction was self-inflicted. I typed back to Victoria. Thanks for letting me know. I assume this doesn't affect the settlement I've already received, correct? They already paid you in full. Bankruptcy is about their other debts. Your case is closed. Good. I showed the message to Anton. He read it, set down his drink, and looked at me carefully. How do you feel? Like justice happened. Like actions had consequences. Like I'm ready to stop looking backward and focus on what comes next. What does come next? I thought about that. The foundation was growing. The book was still selling. My art career was flourishing. I had commissions lined up for the next year. The international exhibition would keep my work traveling for months. I was building something sustainable, meaningful, mine. More of this, I said finally. More creating. More helping other artists. More refusing to let anyone tell me what my work is worth. More living the life I want, instead of the life someone else thinks I should have. Sounds good. Sounds really good. We clinked glasses, toasting to new beginnings and necessary endings, to families you're born into and families you choose, to art that matters and stories that heal. The next morning, flying back to New York, I pulled out my sketchbook and started designing a new piece. This one wouldn't be about my parents, or the fight, or the betrayal. It would be about building, about what comes after you've torn down the walls that confined you, about the freedom of open space, about possibilities that exist when you stop seeking permission and start creating anyway. I titled it tentatively, Permission Denied, Dream Approved, because that's what my life had become. My parents had denied me permission to be an artist. They'd told me it was useless, impractical, worthless. But I'd approved my own dream anyway. I'd done the work, built the career, created the life I wanted, and their denial had become irrelevant. That was the final lesson, the ultimate revenge. You don't need anyone's permission to become who you're meant to be. You just need your own commitment to doing the work anyway, despite the doubters, despite the obstacles, despite the people who benefit from you staying small. My parents had told me my art was useless. But the auction results, the exhibitions, the book sales, the foundation grants, the lives changed. All of it proved they'd been wrong. And that proof wasn't just personal vindication. It was permission for every artist who'd ever been dismissed to keep creating anyway. Because our art is never useless. It's just threatening to people who can't understand it. And sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to stop creating. Despite everything anyway. Epilogue. 5 years after the lawsuit, I stood in my new studio, a converted warehouse in Brooklyn with floor-to-ceiling windows and space for a dozen artists to work simultaneously. The Sienna Ashford Foundation had grown beyond my wildest dreams. We'd given grants to over 200 artists, provided legal support for 50 cases of family exploitation, and established mentorship programs connecting emerging artists with established professionals. The space was full of light and creative energy. 3 artists were painting in the main area. 2 were working on sculptures near the back. 1 was setting up a photography station. All of them had stories similar to mine. Families who dismissed, sabotaged, or stolen from them. All of them had found their way here, to this community of artists who understood what it meant to create despite opposition. Maya, not the gallery owner but one of our grant recipients, approached me with a completed canvas. She was 22, had been kicked out by her parents for refusing to give up painting and pursue nursing. We'd given her a grant, connected her with a mentor, and provided studio space. Now, 2 years later, she was creating work that was getting attention from serious collectors. "I want you to see this before I submit it to the gallery," she said, turning the canvas toward me. It showed a young woman painting while a door stood open behind her, light streaming through. In the shadows outside the door, figures watched but didn't enter. The painter ignored them completely, focused entirely on her work. "It's called I Don't Need Your Approval," Maya explained. "It's about realizing that the people who dismissed you don't deserve access to your creative space. You can close the door on them and keep creating anyway." I felt tears prick my eyes. It's perfect. Absolutely perfect. The gallery is going to love it. "I wouldn't even have a gallery without you," she said. "Without this foundation, I'd probably be working some job I hate, trying to paint in stolen moments, wondering if my parents were right about me being a failure. You gave me permission to choose myself." "No," I corrected gently. "I gave you resources. You gave yourself permission. That's the part that matters." After she left, I walked through the studio, checking in with each artist, offering feedback and encouragement. This was my favorite part of running the foundation, not the administrative work or the fundraising or the legal advocacy, but this. Being in community with other creators, building something together, proving that art made by people who'd been told they were useless was actually necessary and powerful. My phone buzzed. A message from Anton. "Thought you should know. Dad died this morning. Heart attack. Mom called me to tell you." I sat down heavily, staring at that message. My father was dead. The man who'd called my art worthless, who'd stolen my work, who'd fought the lawsuit to the bitter end, who'd never apologized or acknowledged wrongdoing. He was gone. I waited for grief to hit, but all I felt was a strange numbness. Not satisfaction at his death. I wasn't that hardened. Just nothing. He'd been dead to me for 5 years already. His physical death just made official what had been emotionally true for a long time. I called Anton. "How's Mom?" "Devastated. Asking for you. Wanting to know if you'll come to the funeral." "I won't." I told her you'd probably say that. She's not surprised, just sad. She's had 5 years to apologize, to acknowledge what they did, to try to make amends. She chose not to. So no, I'm not going to pretend we had a relationship worth mourning just because he died. Fair enough. I'll handle everything. You don't have to be involved. Thank you. I paused. Are you okay? I'm sad. Even though he was difficult, he was still my father. But I also understand why you're not sad. He hurt you in ways he never would try to continue hurt me. I'm sorry you're going through this alone. I'm not alone. I have my wife, my kids, my life. And I have you. That's enough. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet studio processing. My father was dead. The man who'd shaped so much of my early life, who'd crushed my dreams with cold logic, who'd stolen from me, who'd refused to ever admit fault, was gone. And I felt nothing but relief that I no longer had to wonder if he'd ever acknowledge what he'd done. He wouldn't. He couldn't. He died believing he was right, and I was wrong. And I had to accept that. 3 days later, Anton called again. The funeral was today. Mom kept looking at the door like she hoped you'd walk in. When you didn't, she broke down completely. Said she'd lost both her children, Dad to death and you to pride. She didn't lose me to pride. She lost me to theft and lies. There's a difference. I know. But Sienna, she's going to reach out. She's grieving and alone and looking for connection. I'm just warning you. I'll handle it if she does. The message came 2 days later, from a number I didn't recognize, but assumed was my mother's latest attempt to contact me. Sienna, your father is gone. I know you're angry with us. I know you think what we did was unforgivable, but he's dead now. He can't apologize. He can't make things right. And I'm alone. I'm your mother. Doesn't that mean anything? Can't we please try to heal this before it's too late? I read it 3 times before responding. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to maintain the boundaries I'd established. But another part, the part that had learned something about grace through building the foundation, felt like she deserved a response. Not reconciliation, but clarity. I typed carefully. Mom, I'm sorry for your loss. I know losing Dad is painful. But healing doesn't mean pretending the past 5 years didn't happen. You and Dad stole from me. You lied about it. You fought the lawsuit instead of admitting fault. And in 5 years, neither of you ever genuinely apologized. Not once did you say we were wrong to steal your work. We were wrong to lie to collectors. We're sorry for the harm we caused. You only ever said, we're sorry you're upset, or we were trying to help you. Those aren't apologies. Those are excuses. I don't hate you, but I don't trust you. And without trust, there's no relationship to rebuild. I've moved on with my life. I've built a career, a foundation, a community. I'm happy. I'm successful. I'm exactly where I should be. And I got here by stopping waiting for your approval. If you want contact with me, here's what needs to happen. You need to admit, explicitly and without excuses, that what you did was wrong. You need to acknowledge that you stole from me, lied about it, and tried to control my career for your own benefit. You need to apologize for the harm you caused, not for my reaction to it. And you need to do this without expecting forgiveness or reconciliation in return. If you can do that, genuinely do that, not perform it, to manipulate me back into contact, then maybe we can have a conversation. But if you can't, then please stop contacting me. I'm not interested in a relationship built on unacknowledged harm. I hope you find peace. I really do. But I've already found mine. And it doesn't include pretending the past didn't happen. I sent it before I could second-guess myself, then turned off my phone and went back to work. The studio was full of artists creating, building, refusing to let family dysfunction stop them from pursuing their dreams. This was my family now. These were my people. 2 weeks passed before my mother responded. When she did, her message surprised me. Sienna, you're right. Everything you said is right. Your father and I stole your work. We lied to collectors. We tried to control your career. We told ourselves we were helping you when we were really helping ourselves. We valued money and reputation more than we valued your trust. We treated you like property instead of like a person. I'm sorry. I'm deeply, genuinely sorry. Not for your reaction, for our actions. We were wrong. completely, indefensibly wrong. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to want a relationship with me. I just needed to finally say it. You were right, we were wrong, and I'm sorry. Your father died without ever admitting that. I don't want to die the same way. Mom, I stared at that message for a long time. It was what I'd asked for. Clear admission of fault. No excuses. Genuine apology. But reading it didn't bring the satisfaction I'd expected. It just made me sad. Sad for all the years we'd wasted. Sad that it had taken my father's death for her to finally speak truth. Sad that this acknowledgement had come too late to rebuild anything real. I showed it to Anton when he visited that weekend. He read it carefully, then looked at me. What are you going to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to accept the apology and try to build something with her. But another part thinks it's too little, too late. That 5 years of denial followed by one honest message doesn't erase the damage. Both parts can be true. You can acknowledge her apology without having to reconcile. You can appreciate her finally admitting fault without trusting her again. What would you do? I'd probably give her a chance, but I'm me, not you. And she didn't steal from me. She didn't spend 5 years lying to me. You get to make this decision based on what's right for you, not what's generous or forgiving or expected. I sat with the question for a week before responding to my mother. Mom, thank you for finally admitting what you did. That acknowledgement matters, even if it comes late. I'm not ready for a relationship. I don't know if I'll ever be ready, but I can accept your apology for what it is. Genuine recognition that you were wrong. That's more than Dad ever gave me. And it's something. If in the future you want to build a relationship with me, it will have to be on new terms. Not as parent and child, that's broken beyond repair. But maybe as two adults who share history and are trying to do better. Maybe. For now, this is enough. You've admitted fault. I've accepted your apology, and we can both move forward from here. Sienna, it wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement. She'd finally spoken the truth I'd needed to hear, and I'd confirmed that I'd heard it. That was as much healing as might ever be possible between us. And I was okay with that, because I'd learned something important through this whole experience. You don't need closure from the people who hurt you to move on with your life. You just need to close that chapter yourself. My mother's apology was nice, but it wasn't necessary. I'd already found my peace years ago, when I'd stopped waiting for them to validate me and started validating myself. 6 months later, on the 5-year anniversary of my initial press conference, the foundation held a gala fundraiser. Over 300 people attended. Artists we'd supported, collectors who donated, advocates for creative autonomy, and press covering our impact. Diana Rothstein gave a speech about how the foundation had changed lives. Sienna Ashford didn't just win a lawsuit 5 years ago. She started a movement. She proved that artists deserve legal protection, family support, and respect for their work. The foundation bearing her name has helped hundreds of creators escape exploitation and build sustainable careers. That legacy matters more than any single artwork could. Then it was my turn to speak. I stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd. So many faces, so many stories, so many people who'd been told their dreams were useless and had pursued them anyway. 5 years ago, I filed a lawsuit against my parents for stealing my work. People called me vindictive, cruel, ungrateful. They said I was destroying my family over money. But it was never about money. It was about truth. It was about refusing to accept that my art was worthless just because the people who raised me couldn't see its value. The lawsuit succeeded. I won compensation, legal recognition, validation. But the real victory happened after, when I used what I'd learned to help others, when I turned personal pain into collective purpose, when I stopped fighting just for myself and started fighting for everyone who'd been dismissed, exploited, or stolen from. This foundation exists because my parents told me my art was useless. If they'd supported me, if they'd valued my work, if they'd been honest, I might have had a normal career, a fine career. But I wouldn't have this. I gestured around the room. I wouldn't have this community, this mission, this chance to make sure that what happened to me doesn't keep happening to others. So in a strange way, I'm grateful. Not for the pain, that was real and it mattered, but for what the pain taught me. That you're stronger than you think. That you can survive betrayal and build something beautiful from the rubble. That the best revenge isn't destruction, it's transformation. My parents said my art was useless, but you're all here tonight because that useless art changed my life, changed your lives, changed the conversation about what creative work means and who gets to control it. And that matters more than any auction result ever could. The room erupted in applause. People were standing, crying, clapping. I saw Maya in the crowd, the young painter whose work now sold for thousands. I saw other grant recipients, artists whose careers we'd helped launch. I saw Victoria, who'd fought my legal battle and now served on our board. I saw Anton with his family, proud of what I'd built. And in the very back, barely visible, I saw my mother. She'd come. She was crying. She wasn't approaching, wasn't trying to talk to me, just bearing witness to what I'd created. Our eyes met across the room. I nodded. She nodded back. And that was enough. After the gala ended and everyone had left, I stood alone in the empty venue, looking at the exhibition of work by foundation artists that had been displayed during the event. 20 pieces by 20 artists, each one representing a story of survival and triumph over family dismissal. My phone buzzed. An email from Sterling House, my publisher. Sienna, Useless has just hit its 100th week on the bestseller list. We're publishing a special anniversary edition with a new afterword. Would you be interested in writing it? We'd love to hear your reflections 5 years later. What's changed, what you've learned, where you're going next. Congratulations on this milestone. 5 years, 100 weeks as a bestseller. Thousands of readers sharing their own stories. Hundreds of artists helped through the foundation. Exhibitions in 23 countries. A legacy built from betrayal. I typed back, yes, I'll write the afterword. Thank you. Walking home through Brooklyn that night, I thought about everything that had led to this moment. My parents' theft, the 73 days of planning, the lawsuit, the victory, the foundation, the books, the exhibitions, the talks, the life I'd built from the ruins of the relationship with my parents. It had all started because they'd told me my art was useless. Because they'd dismissed my dreams so thoroughly that they'd felt entitled to steal my work and profit from it. Because they'd seen me as a failure who needed fixing instead of an artist who needed support. But their blindness had become my vision. Their theft had become my mission. Their betrayal had become my purpose. And 5 years later, I'd built something that mattered. Not because they'd approved. They never did. Not really. Not until it was too late. But because I'd approved. Because I'd decided my work had value regardless of what anyone else thought. Because I'd chosen to create anyway, despite everything, in spite of everyone who said I couldn't. My parents had told me my art was useless, but the auction results told a different story. And so did the hundreds of artists who'd found support through the foundation. And so did the thousands of readers who'd found courage in my book. And so did the galleries and collectors and critics who'd recognized what my parents couldn't see. My art was never useless. It just took me 26 years to stop letting other people define its worth. And that realization, that I was the only person whose opinion of my work truly mattered, was worth more than any amount of money, any legal victory, any revenge could ever be. Because the best revenge isn't making someone pay for hurting you. It's building a life so meaningful that their hurt becomes irrelevant. It's creating so boldly that their dismissal becomes laughable. It's succeeding so completely that you forget to care whether they're watching. My parents said my art was useless, but I proved them wrong every single day. With every piece I created, with every artist I helped, with every life I touched through work they'd insisted had no value. And that proof, that undeniable, documented, public proof, was the sweetest revenge I could have ever imagined. Not because it destroyed them, but because it freed me.